have some time for coffee. Yeah.
I'm retired, so.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Time in the world.
Okay. Join me for coffee after. Do you have a question for either of our panelists?
Well, what I want to know is why haven't you come to other groups and tried to unite as one? Yeah, the thing is, my problem is, right, is that we've got all these little groups, one's for autism, one's for kids with Tourette's, yeah, another one's just for kids for Autistic. What we need to do is to unite as one, right, and become one. Like I've got groups, three major groups have got about 1,000 people in it. Across the country, we've probably got about 10,000 people. But the thing is we have to unite as one, right? Autism, all right, we've got people on their site with kids with autism, right? But that's not our main goal. Our main goal is to change it for everyone, right? You guys, and I'm not criticising you, right? Because you obviously watch it. But the thing is you've got to step away from just this narrow-minded view, if you want. You know, this tunnel vision on autism. Because there's kids, right, that are handicapped, there's kids that are mentally handicapped, there's native kids, right? And it all has to be changed together for the good of all. Like, as I said, we've made changes and we've got changes, right? The latest one that I just heard of yesterday, and we won't know about it until November, is that now the workers have to inform the children of their rights. They used to toss them a pamphlet and say, yeah, educate yourself, get on with it. Well, 10-year-old kid isn't going to understand what's in that pamphlet. Now they have to inform them exactly their rights. They have to tell them how much money they're entitled to a year, right? So, I think changes are coming, right? And we've made about 5 changes already, so.
Okay, all right, thanks, Mr. Hoare. So, what about it then, Lyndon? What do you think about the idea of there being some kind of more of an umbrella? I don't know whether an umbrella organization is needed or some kind of a consultative organization amongst the various lobby groups such as yourself.
Well, I totally agree with the principle, but I want to put it in some context. Autism 20 years ago was a rare condition. Diagnosis of autism was 1 in 15,000. Today, diagnosis of autism is 1 in 64 for boys, 1 in 88 for girls. So, I mean, you're seeing now, you know, I'm the first executive director for Autism Calgary. Prior to that, it was, we're still very grassroots, still small relative to other disability groups. So even sort of in the last 5 years, we were quite splintered as a community. We had sort of the ABA pure focus groups, we had FEET groups, and they didn't get along with some of the initial grassroots groups, which were, from parents that evolved from a different set of politics, and they didn't get along with parent groups that were more about alternative interventions. We were highly splintered. We're now more united, and now gaining capacity as charities and as associations and organizations to get funding and capacity. And again, just like you and your organization, you're burnt out people with passion. So there's capacity, right? But there's capacity, but there's real limits to it. And that's why we do have to pull together, and when we pull together, we're stronger. But again, these organizations are also building nonprofits, bases to put in some staff to try and alleviate and maybe take the passion of the volunteers on the board so that some of the grunt work is done. It's growth in community capacity for advocacy groups, and I think we're there.
This is
to start to collaborate more. Pardon me?
I don't know if they're like that comment.
Right. So I think it's just the evolution of social movement. But absolutely, I think we have time to connect now. I think autism community is more organized to be able to.
So maybe you can follow up later on, and we should move on to another question.
I have to go somewhere, and I just want to say something. Dawkin in Calgary, DOCKEN, is taking class action lawsuit against Child and Family Services. DOCKEN, look it up and do it fast, because I think everything has to be signed by January.
Okay, thanks a lot. Vince, you had a question?
So I'd like to make a comment and then a question to Lyndon. Lyndon, you brought up a very good point about, for parents and families, the issue of class and the issue of education, particularly with regards to actually moving throughout the CPS system. I'd like to relate to my case, actually. When I was 6, 7 years old, myself and my 4 siblings were taken into Child Protective Services. 3 of my siblings having extreme forms of autism. Thank heavens they're high functioning. Otherwise, I don't know what my single mother would do. So, and I was just, well, they picked up 3 of them, why not pick up all of them? So I got swooped in with that, and the way that my mother navigated the system was that the first thing she did was call up a $400 an hour lawyer. She used her 4 degrees. She failed out of law school, but went with a psychology degree. She has a nursing degree, an education degree. She's just finished up a PhD in criminal forensics. Don't really know how to describe it aside from that. I don't understand it. And then she had another degree from earlier in her career. So highly educated, lady of means, single mother. She was able to navigate through the entire system in 2.5 months. And then 4 months out, the process for getting myself and my siblings out of there were, fairly well done in 6 months from inception to exit. The process was done and I was back at home with my mother. So there are some extreme divides comparing my scenario when I was a child and what's happening with Native youth and families from across Alberta that do not have the same opportunity or ability. So my question to you is, what's being done on the government side and on the services side to actually, correct for that difference? Because my family had an advantage, and not everyone else has that advantage.
I don't think they're doing anything because, certainly I do a lot of the advocacy to navigate supports under Family Support for Children with Disabilities Act. And I'm certainly meeting repeatedly with people under the local region as well as the deputy ministers, stating the disparity between lower income families, ethnocultural community families. There is still a massive disparity in those that get intensive interventions. Families with multiple incomes are denied intensive behavioral intervention supports because they're told the parent is expected to be at home, which is a bastardization of the actual legislation that says no such thing. There's certainly concepts of family managed supports, but it seems their actions are, they're justified by the even distribution and allocation of funds. They have massive portfolios and they're underfunded. So they seem to come up with plans that don't live up to the reputation or the potential of this legislation, and there's a disparity. I mean, that's the separation I see, is there's lots of money wasted, so it's not necessarily about funding. They waste a lot of money on administrative process, but money plays a big role. And someone mentioned, you mentioned bonuses. Well, I mean, certainly the hierarchy under the Children's Disability Services side, the higher level management are less accountable to the ethics or construct or intent of the Act. It's more about whether they balance their budget. They balance their budget, they get their bonus. So as you migrate up the levels of management, the system isn't designed for internal advocacy. So you might have some passionate social workers in it if they last, because it's probably very stressful to be in it, but they leave because the system has no way to internally advocate to say, look, this family isn't getting what they need. So it doesn't build in its construct. There's no ideological construct that allows for some internal checks that could happen, some internal advocacy. It's defined to be closed and to be, it's all about the budget as you climb up the top. So nothing is being done other than us scrambling
the whole system
to do something.
is geared against the poor. Like, you can't get legal aid unless you earn less than $8,000 a year. Right? You have to appeal every time you're slightly over. I'm on a pension, and so I'm not a rich man. Yeah? And the other thing is child services has a lot of say in what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. My wife and I had to spend $35,000 to get grandparents and the extended family recognised, right, to get guardianship. Before that, child services used to have to turn around and say, you can go for guardianship. Yeah. So they have a lot of power and they should not be allowed to have the amount of power. The other thing is that they spend a lot of money keeping children away from families. Yeah. Well, I don't know how much they get paid for autism.
Well, I mean, my knowledge is more on the disability services.
Well, yeah,
less
what I'm
on
just
child
saying
protection.
is the parents of that child, if they keep the child at home, right, how much do they get paid?
The money does not go to the child, it goes to the supportive services,
Yes.
caregivers, psychologists,
Yeah.
teams
But-
of therapy.
But they will pay, right, a foster parent anywhere from $12,000 to $2,500 a month, depending on the disability of the child, right? Why aren't they paying that to the parents to look after this child? Like, that's part of the frustration, is that they are prepared to pay more for a foster parent than they are to the parents. Right? The thing is sorry?
Well, generally, the disability legislation is very impressive. So I think the problem is mostly process. Where it probably enters the challenge you face is where you do have a parent that has sacrificed their career and is the caregiver for the child, and they cannot get paid the same kind of caregiver support for the care of their own child because they're expected to do it for free. So
Yeah,
I do see
it's-
that contradiction.
I can see it for autism as well, because a child that's got autism must cost far more to take care of than it does for a normal child. Like, you would have to have specialised babysitters for a start.
Well, our disabilities regulation, like I will defend it, I fear changes to the actual Family Support for Children with Disabilities Act. If the process to support it followed its intent, it is very impressive. Families can get rest. There's two categories of just respite alone, which is relief to allow you to have the empowerment to be a good parent. There's two categories. Under children-focused services, you can have 240 hours a year. Under family-focused services, there's no limit. You just have to articulate what you need.
See, I'm not very...
There's also work-related childcare that
I'm not very well versed in it, but what I can see from the outside is to have a handicapped child, a child with autism or whatever, must cost you not only in time and effort, but in specialised help.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just walk away and say to your next door neighbour, look after my child.
Right. Well, even with the best advocacy, I'm paying a lot. So, for example, I do have an intensive therapy team for my children. The FSCD will pay $95.50 an hour for the psychologist, who charges $180 an hour. They'll pay $97.25 for a
I think the point's well taken, because I mean, if we accept that the premise that familial relations are a good thing, and I think we can all agree on that, I think it's an important question: is why shouldn't there be some support for parents of children with disabilities? Let's pick up that discussion later on. This lady in front here, you had a point to make or a question?
Okay, well, yeah, partially it does sort of it, but it's not specific to disabilities. I mean, last year, the year before, we had a case in Calgary where we had Mr. Jason Devine, who was attacked in his home, and his children were taken away because child welfare claimed that he was not providing a safe environment, and by being an advocate, he was basically inviting violence into his home.
Our Senate was actually contacted by Jason Devine in relation to that issue.
Okay, so my thing was that they were willing to take 4 children and put them into foster care, which costs a whole lot to have 4 children in foster care. They'll even pay foster parents up to $195 a day, and this is on the compensation guide. You can read it online. $195 a day for child care for their children as well as the foster children. So if they're willing to even pay that extreme amount, and as a single parent at one point in time, and I applied for child care, I was only allowed to have $300 a month. and I had to come up with the rest for any daycare. Yet they will pay a foster parent $195 a day for their child care, for their own children as well as the children that they foster. And when you add up these numbers and you do, rough estimates on what a foster parent could get paid for, we're talking about even non-disabled children, healthy children, it costs far more money to take those 4 children away than it would have to be paid private security outside of his home. A private security firm could have cost $3,000, which having 4 children in care would have cost $5,000 plus. So there's other avenues that they can take financially and decide to allocate those funds to keeping those children at home, yet they do nothing. They absolutely made no attempt. They just told them, you have to change your lifestyle, you have to stop advocating for, these ethnic groups, and otherwise, we're going to keep your kids. And that's pretty much what they told him. Now he said, no, I'm not going to stop being, doing what I'm doing. My children are safe, they're loved, and they did return those children. But at the end of the day, when as a single parent, I can't even get more than $400 a month to subsidize my childcare. My childcare costs $700 a month, but a foster parent can get $200 a day? That is ridiculous. Isn't there somebody standing up and going, where are these funds going? You're spending billions of dollars giving these foster parents money, but you can't support the natural parents? Or even taking a step where I had a case, a child welfare worker walked into a home and said their back deck was falling apart and there was nails sticking out of the fence and it was a safety hazard for the children and they needed to remove the children. If I was a social worker, because I am a nurse and I do community resources, I would think to take it upon myself to contact the landlord and say this needs to be fixed, rather than just up and take those kids and say, sorry parents, you have to pay for the repairs to the place or move. They don't put in any actual steps to help that family remedy the situation. They just leave it all onto the parents and say, you're responsible, you deal with it. It'll come out of your pocket, we're not going to help you. And even when they request things as simple as counseling, they say, okay, we'll pay for counseling. They attend the first couple sessions and then the counselor doesn't get paid and says, I'm not going to further help you. So, there's a massive allocation problem with the funds from where they're going and how much they're willing to pay foster parents. And like Terry said, we calculated the one day it was $145,000 a year that a person who had 4 disabled children could get. $145,000 a year for 4 foster children that have disabilities. They can just stay at home. If you're willing to pay that to foster parents, why the hell are you not willing to pay it to natural parents? At least something, not necessarily, of course, sign up for child welfare because you're going to get an income. But if a parent says, I have to work a night shift and I need a nanny in my home to watch my children because there's no child care, they should be stepping up rather than saying, well, you have to quit your job or find another one because we don't like your child care options.
I really wish the manager for Children and Family Services for the Calgary region was here today because I think they have a lot of questions for him. It sounds like the money's there, but it's just being misallocated.
Absolutely.
It sounds like there's an industry.
It is, and that was partially what Terry was talking about, the privatization. Now that sort of came to my knowledge about 2 years ago when I was doing my research, because I've been doing research for 10 years on child welfare, especially in Alberta. And you can go right to the Tri-West website, and they state right there that they are that they do foster care and that it's a paid system. Now, unfortunately, because it's a privately traded company, none of their financials are available. And I know about financials because my husband's a stockbroker, so I understand how to request those things, and they do not give them. The only way to do that is technically to FOIP the ministries as to who they're paying. But that's the only way you can get it. But you can see how much they pay every year, so why aren't they paying it to parents? Helping those parents out on the grassroots level.
I'm just kind of ruefully laughing there now because you said you could always FOIP that. I'm not laughing because I find it funny and kind of gallows humor there because I attended a FOIP conference last month and I learned that Alberta leads the country in the response time to FOIP requests. They're very quick, but they're the worst in the country for giving information. You'll get back something that is so redacted, you might as well just taking a black marker and color it in.
Well, I FOIP'd my file, which I have my children, that they have never been taken from me, but I did have an open file for a short period of time, and I FOIP'd my 300 pages. And almost all of it, including stuff that I said, there was one visit I made, I asked her to come while the workers sit there. I never have let those workers in my home without having a witness. I asked her to be there, and they actually redacted in there that she was there. I know she was there, she was in my home. But they took her name out and blocked it out. So my husband and I had to file together so that his name would not be removed from any of my stuff. So, you know, it's a really ridiculous.
Terry, let's hear from your companion.
Yeah, I just
Oh,
want
yes.
to correct something first. Dry West isn't directly involved in child services.
You gotta go to
But
AAS.
it's junior companies, which is AAS and.
CBI
I
House.
keep it-
CBI, and there's also
CBI.
Shaw Communities do the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But I wanted to change the subject here a little bit. My name's Barb Weeb, and I'm with Alberta Child and Family First. I go by Grandma Jean on Facebook because I had to hide when I first come on there because they took my grandchildren in 2008, and I've been fighting for them. I finally got to see my 15-year-old grandson in August. And we're still trying to work to get him home with us. I live with my son who lost the children. But besides that, I always felt that as a Canadian, we had a court system that protected us. And I said to my son, well, child services can say what they want, but when we go into court, it will be a different matter. Well, boy, I sure got a slap in the face and woke up real quick. The family court is a kangaroo court it's obnoxious. It's full of perjury by the workers, by their professional psychologists and psychiatrists. They lie so much you almost need a scoop shovel to clean out the court with.
Yeah.
And I agree with Derek. In the court, we should get rid of preponderance of evidence. That allows these judges to take your children because something could have, may have, or possibly have
Might
happened.
Yeah.
So we need to change this to from preponderance of evidence to beyond a reasonable doubt to make these workers and judges follow a strict law of evidence. And beyond a reasonable doubt is the strongest, I guess the highest level of evidence.
It is, Barb. Yeah, it is. You know, and me having a legal background, I mean, you were really giving me a lot to think about here because the whole rationale behind standard of proof being beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal sphere is that people are going to lose their liberty. So we have to have this extremely high threshold. And yet, we have, with Children and Family Services, a situation where people are losing their liberty.
Yeah,
Right?
what you're losing your
So-
children, your life, your most important thing to you in the
It's
world.
really
is your
something to
children.
think. It is really something to think.
And you go in
There's
there
an
and
interest
you're
that are
just,
involved.
it makes me sick, it makes me ashamed to be an Albertan and a Canadian the way you were treated in family court. You have no rights, whatever you say, they can say that you're a liar, and the judges who, a lot of them are former employees of Child Protective Services that were their legal counsels, they just agree with whatever they say, and what you say is a lie, and what the children's workers and professionals say is all the truth. So there's no use of you even going to court, because that is, you have no rights in there.
Yeah.
And that's my main problem with it.
And the children's human rights to be with their family first are taken as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And the children have no rights in court either. My grandson was 13 years old, and they would not allow him to testify in court.
Part of the problem
He's
is,
not allowed to testify?
He was not allowed to testify. His lawyer said he
He's a
didn't need to
mature minor
testify.
Under provincial law, he should have been able to speak.
No, his lawyer said he didn't need to speak. And it was left at that, and there's absolutely nothing we could do.
part of the problem with family court is it's not considered a criminal court, it is considered a civil court,
Right, right.
right?
Where
And that
there's
has
a
to
different standard of proof, but indeed, I think the argument can be made that because of the interests that are involved, I mean, you have children who are being taken away from their families, there's a loss of liberty, perhaps there should be a different standard of proof.
All right, I'll repeat what part of my wife keeps saying is, if all these people, right, are abusing their children one way or
Why aren't they
another,
in jail?
they should be charged and in jail. So
Exactly.
why haven't we got 4,000 parents in jail?
No.
Because there's 9,800 children in care right now, and there's 1,800 children in kinship. So why aren't these parents in jail and being charged?
Exactly.
Because it doesn't serve their purpose, because they wouldn't win.
About a month ago, Chief Wilton Littlechild, who's one of the members of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which investigated the heinous history of the residential schools, said something shocking, that 70% of Aboriginal children are in foster care.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Well, I think it's down now to 48%.
That's still shocking.
That is
They're
disgusting
leaning more
because they
towards
only
kinship
represent,
there.
what, 20% of the population?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's just plain wrong.
yeah.
Yeah, but Child Services has a warrant basically to walk into anybody's house and take anything, which is illegal because under the Charter of Rights, Section 8, right, we are to be free of illegal search and seizures, right? And every enforcement agency has to get a warrant. Why is it Child Services doesn't? There's nowhere in the act, in the Charter of Rights that excuses them. Because they've lied so long, right, and said that they're allowed to do it so long that people believe it. It's like a lot of things Child Services does, right? They say, oh, we're allowed to do it, but they're not. In the Act, it says they are, quite clearly, they are to go to family first. 99% of the time they do not go to families, they grab the children. Why? Because they're paid, right, for apprehension, foster care and adoption. They're not paid, right, to go to somebody's house and say, you need help, right, we'll help you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's the same in autism. Yeah, I guarantee they don't give you as much help as they do the foster parents.
I'm not from Alberta originally, I've been out here for 11 years, so this is shocking to me. Those of you who work as advocates, has it always been like this, where there's this
No,
private
it's in the
interest?
last 20 years,
Yeah,
sir. Like, my oldest son is 42 years old, and when he was a child, you never heard of this kind of stuff.
The thing is that people believe that, and I did, before I got involved, I thought, all right, they took your kids, Child
You
Services
deserved
must
it.
have a reason.
Yes.
So I didn't question it.
Okay, I want to hear from my friend Michelle.
I'm just going to clarify that 20 years ago, you never heard non-whites go through this.
Sorry,
That's
Michelle,
true, yeah.
That's all I wanted
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah, no, the
Because
Native people
20 years
suffered from
ago-
it since the beginning,
Yeah.
when white people came over here.
Yeah.
They suffered at the hands of the government, yes,
Yes.
100%.
And I'll give you a piece of information, right? The modern version of Child Services, I bet you can't tell me who started it or designed it.
Ralph Klein.
Adolf Hitler designed this version
The
of
best
Child
interest of the
Services.
child came from the Nazis during their
They
occupation.
said you control the children, you control the family.
And you control the minds of the children today, you control the minds of the adults.
And
the
it
next
was all based
generation.
off of all the eugenics that was going on here in the States and Alberta.
Think about it, right? The Gestapo would walk into a home, grab whoever they wanted, right? Oh, Child Services walks in a home, takes your children. They don't even knock anymore. If the door's unlocked, they'll walk in and say they've got the right to. They don't, right? They'll go in. If you don't let them in, they'll walk around to the police and bring the police in. Now, a police officer knows he has to have a warrant. Yet, because he's told by Child Services, right, he believes that he doesn't need a warrant. And Child Services is built on a faction of lies, from top to bottom. They created their own little power.
I've learned so much here today. We'll just have to wrap up because we have to vacate the room for a class that's coming in here shortly. Derek Hoare unfortunately has to catch a cab at 2 o'clock to get back to British Columbia. Lyndon, are you available to stick around after over coffee and chat for a bit, or do we
I
have to?
am. Are you heading to the airport?
Yes, going to the airport.
Because I live near the airport.
Oh.
I head back that way, so
Oh.
I might have to save it tonight.
Sure. And anyone who wants to join us for coffee
I
and
have a bit more time.
yeah, okay. So anyone who wants to join us for coffee and debriefing, the Civil Liberties Research Center is just down the hall to the left, and we're in room 2350. It's on your right-hand side before the plus 15. Thank you very much for coming. I've learned so much here today, and there's obviously a lot of room for serious reform within the child protection agencies in this province and British Columbia as well. Please join me in thanking our speakers.